different points of view and understand how to have that deliberative dialogue. Many schools allow their students to do this and doing a great job with it, but there are also many schools that don't ever allow their students to engage in that civil discourse. And I believe when we don't do that, that's when we wind up with adults that don't know how to talk to each other. It's when we wind up with politicians that sometimes can't come to consensus on issues, and why some people really sometimes even dislike others if their views are different than their own. But by engaging in difficult conversations, students are really going to learn how to have that civic dialogue and become those critical thinkers that we really need them to be in this next generation. We need them to be problem solvers. We need them to be able to talk about things and even when they disagree with other people. Many teachers are afraid of opening up this space in their classroom. They're afraid that what's heard in the homes and what's heard in the communities, what's heard on the news, is going to translate into their classroom and just become this uproar. But I can promise you that it is already translating into our schools. We have to give students the space and then the skills and let them practice it to really be able to foster these next generation of citizens that we want them to be. So how can we create classroom environments that are built on trust? Because trust is going to be the key element that you're going to have in order to help students understand how to have these conversations that really matter, and have the conversations that are going to sometimes be controversial. They're going to sometimes disagree, or when students actually have a disagreement in your classroom, how are you going to help them understand how to talk it out? And again, trust is going to be the way in which you help students understand this. So the number one way that I found the easiest thing to do to build trust is to have a classroom contract around these conversations about how we talk to each other. Now, many of you may already have your classroom contract. You probably already have your rules. You already have your procedures. But I'm talking about having a classroom contract just for these hard conversations of when we disagree, when we're talking about something that's controversial. And so what you can do is ask students a series of 6 questions, and I'll post these questions in a document that's up on my website after this video. And basically it just says, how would you like to be treated in our community? How are we going to listen to each other when we're talking? What can we do to ensure that everybody feels comfortable to speak, because you're going to have students that sometimes don't want to speak up? How are you going to make them feel comfortable? How are we going to handle it when our feelings get hurt? What are we going to do then? How are we going to make sure everyone's voice is heard in the conversation, especially if you have classrooms with more than 30 people? And how are we going to handle violations of the contract? Because I can promise you, you're going to have some students that are going to violate your contract. So then how are you going to handle it? So I'd give these questions to students individually. I'd let them write down what their opinions are about these individually, and then I would let them get in groups and talk about it, and then I would share out amongst the whole class, so that you're not creating this classroom contract, your students are creating the rules for you, and then you can all agree on exactly what it is you want to do when you're having these tough conversations in the classroom, whether it be on a controversial issue, whether it be about an issue in your school that's going on right now, or whether it be about an issue in the community, or one that they may see on the news. Or again, it may just be an issue between 2 students that are having a conflict. So this gives you a procedure, a set of skills, a set of ways for students to know this is how we treat each other in this classroom. Some of you may need this set of skills for your homes. There are some families that are very big, and you've kind of got to get in where you can fit in when you're having a conversation where people don't agree. And so some of you may think about, maybe I need this for my home. Or maybe you're not a teacher, maybe you need this for your workplace. Because again, there are many adults that don't know how to have conversations with each other about issues and topics that matter. And if we're not allowing our students to practice these skills in elementary school, middle school, and high school, then we're doing them a disjustice when they get out into the real world, and we think that they're supposed to be able to solve problems and talk to each other about things that matter, and be able to really get to the bottom of solving problems. The last thing I want to say before I go is that I'm going to post another document of norms that I use a lot of times when I'm talking to students. One is to use I statements. So if you're saying something, you own your part of the conversation. So I feel when you do so and so, this is how I feel, or I believe, right, or I think. Put the onus back on you so that it's not everybody feels this way, or you're not making generalized statements. You're saying, I feel this way. The second thing is to acknowledge when others help you. Maybe somebody did change your opinion. Maybe somebody did make you see a different way of viewing things. Acknowledge that. Help them see, hey, you made me see a different way of thinking. I hadn't thought about it this way. Teach students to ask questions, so give them a sentence starter. And I used to give them, I still do, say, I'm wondering. So if you're having a conversation with somebody and you're, not really agreeing with them, start your sentence with, I'm wondering, could you tell me more about? That's another thing. Or I'm not really understanding this. So that's a good way for students to really be able to ask questions and practice the skill of asking questions, because that's another good civic skill. And the last thing, this is very important, is when you're having these conversations, allow students to keep a journal with them and keep it out. This way, if students aren't comfortable sharing aloud to the whole class, they can write it down in their journal and they can still get that emotion and that thought out. Maybe they can share it with you after class and figure out a way to share it in a safe space. Another thing though, if students are just having a disagreement, and maybe 2 or 3 students, allow them to journal and get their emotions out. Maybe they write it out, maybe they draw it out before they share and actually open up the conversation. This allows them that process time to really get their emotions down on paper and process their emotions before they share it. Again, maybe you want to think about implementing this in your home or your workplace. Maybe sometimes we talk before we think, and then sometimes once we say things, we can't take them back. So journaling, it might be a good way to just process your thoughts before you actually say them. I think that is all. Again, I am going to post both of these resources below the video. I really feel strongly that we have to let students know that they can have meaningful conversations with people that disagree with them, that it is important for them to understand people that even disagree with them. I used to tell my students all the time, I would even go watch news outlets or listen to radio stations of people I didn't necessarily agree with. Didn't mean it was going to change my mind, but at least I was opening myself up to understand their points of view. And because I believe when we only listen to the people that share our same points of view, we're just remaining, kind of closed-minded almost and ignorant to other ways of looking at things. Again, doesn't mean it always changes my mind, but at least I've exposed myself to their viewpoint, I've heard it, and then maybe sometimes my opinions do evolve and change over time because of the way that I am introducing myself to multiple perspectives and multiple ways of viewing things. So I think that's important. Thank you for those that have joined me. Appreciate you. And I will see you next Thursday. Bye.